Hello out there, collectors and sports enthusiasts, and welcome to Hobby Focus with Chris Nerat. I am not Chris Nerat. That is over there. I'm your host, Mike Provenzale. Chris, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I was in Cleveland, Ohio the last few days. It was 39 degrees there and got off the plane in lovely Irving, Texas yesterday, and it was probably about a 30 or 40 degree difference. So pretty happy about that.
Real globetrotting there, Irving to Cleveland, making people jealous. But that trip is what made us choose this topic. Today, we're going to talk about collections. Working in an auction house, we see a lot of large collections, things that people have spent their lives or long periods of time putting together. When it's time to sell, we take it seriously, how to handle it and make sure that it's presented correctly. And you've done a lot of that in your time at Heritage, right, Chris?
Yeah, a few times a year, I would say I am fortunate enough to be able to work with some amazing collectors, some athletes, some staff members of teams, and it never gets old, and every one is definitely a different experience.
Yeah, it runs the gambit from just your everyday collectors like us to some Hall of Fame player collections that you've handled. So tell us a little bit about this trip you took yesterday to Cleveland and what kind of collection it was.
So yeah, it was a real interesting collection. The gentleman, his father, started a little sports museum by the old Jacobs Field in Cleveland, and they had everything from autographs to baseball bats to jerseys, mostly Cleveland items, but some other teams. And the highlight of that collection happened to be a game used Babe Ruth bat.
Nice.
So Tony Giese and I went to this gentleman's storage facility. He had a couple units in the Ford storage facility. It was freezing cold in there, but we went through both units, and we definitely picked out some gems. And like I said, the highlight was the Babe Ruth game used bat, which hasn't been graded by PSA DNA yet, but I'm really excited to see what that thing's going to grade out at. I believe, an early 20s Ruth gamer. And that was definitely an exciting piece to pick up.
Yeah, we've been lucky at Heritage to handle quite a few Ruth gamers, but always impressive to see something like that in the wild. And you do run into that when you're picking up a collection a lot that sometimes it's authenticated and graded and they've bought it from auction houses, but a lot of times it's things they've got in person or people that are kind of outside the industry have accumulated. So it's all raw, as it were. So, what do you find is difficult or interesting about these collections that haven't been authenticated yet?
Well, this one was really interesting because it came with a letter of provenance from a gentleman who purchased the bat long ago. The letter of provenance was from 1986. So you don't usually see letters of provenance that's that old, which really added to the legitimacy of the bat. I mean, you could tell by just looking at it and eyeballing it that it was most likely a game used Babe Ruth bat, but having that extra provenance really helps. Um, as far as challenges when the items aren't graded, a lot of times the collectors or the people that we go visit, they want estimated values, and sometimes it's hard to give an estimated value if the item isn't graded yet. What if they have a full ticket from Hank Aaron's debut and it's not graded when it's just hard to come up with comparable results for a ticket that may be a six, but it also might be just graded authentic. So, you have to explain that to the clients, and they're usually pretty understanding with what you're trying to tell them, but it's definitely an extra challenge.
And picking up big collections like that, that's something that we hear from people a lot that don't work in an auction house. It can be commonplace to us that how thrilling it must be, to walk in and see these extensive collections. It's like a treasure trove of history. But let's get into the nitty gritty of it. Uh, talking about walking into a storage unit, it's cold. You're going there to pick up the collection. You got to get it back to our beautiful home office in Dallas. So, what all goes into point A to point B there?
Sure. Tony and I met him at the storage facility, and he let us in there, and then we're trying to set up a little mini office in one of the empty storage units, and the client brought a little folding table that we could set up shop. There was no Wi-Fi. There was no electricity that we could plug in our computers. So just little things like that can pose a challenge. We managed our batteries held up long enough, and we didn't really need the Wi-Fi. But sometimes the client wants you to look up a value of something, and we might not know it off the top of our heads. So having Wi-Fi can be an extra benefit. Um, and sometimes the internet just doesn't work, or the cell phones don't work in these storage facilities because it's all metal in there. Um, that's a challenge sometimes. You want to come prepared, bring razors so you can open up boxes if you need to, bring uh, packing material if you think you're going to be packing a lot of items. And so sometimes we'll ship in bubble wrap, we'll ship in the boxes, packing tape, whatnot. But sometimes you don't know what they're going to have. And that can be a real challenge when you might need to set up an armored vehicle to pick up the collection if it's enough value. And sometimes you just don't know what you're picking up. You might go there thinking you're either picking up $1 million collection. It might turn out to be a $20,000 collection, or vice versa. So you may have the armored vehicle set up, and it might not be what you thought it was going to be. So you might tell the armored people that, sorry, go home. But you also might have to get on the phone with our security at Heritage and tell them, hey, I'm in a bind here. I need an armored truck here ASAP. Is that anything that you can help us with? So there's all sorts of different little obstacles that you can run into. The good thing about Heritage is we have some really good people in our shipping department and our security department, and are usually able to help us on the fly like that. And that's definitely a perk. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
a lot of research resources at Heritage. Our shipping department's definitely one of them. Our shipping department's bigger than most auction houses' entire staff, and you have people that have a lot of expertise at how to prepare for such things. What you're going to send out, especially when you're picking up a memorabilia collection, and you could be doing baseballs and bats and trophies and maybe even framed items. There's a lot of variety to what you could be shipping. I know Ron Spikes that works in our shipping department. He's packed everything from the large World Series trophies to, delicate celluloid fragile items. So we've got a lot of people we can lean on. Um, so what's it like the interaction with the client when you're there? You've talked to them via email or via phone, and then you get a general idea of the collection. But with something so big like that, when you're talking about dozens or hundreds of items, there's no way to see it all until you're there in person. And then all of a sudden you're there with them, and you're going through their collection. You're going to take it away from them. What's that interaction like?
It can range from them handing it over to you and saying, have a good day. And it can also range from it to be a real challenge to, I mean, a lot of these collectors, they've had this stuff their whole lives, or players, it can become a big thing for them when they see the armored truck show up, or they see a Heritage representative show up, and then it becomes real. And when it becomes real, I think they have to really wrap their head around the fact that they're going to be, letting these prized possessions go. And that can be a challenge sometimes. Um, and you try to answer every question they may have before you take the trip, but they think of questions while you're there. And sometimes there's a question that they have, and they may not understand, or or they're not comfortable with the answer. Sometimes, like, sometimes clients forget to ask about reserves, and that's something we'd like to stay away from at Heritage, because typically having a reserve on an item deters bidding. But sometimes when you arrive to their home or their storage unit, they think of reserves, and then they get a little bit apprehensive about handing the things over without reserves, and then that's an extra challenge. We're going to be talking about, I believe, four collections, big collections, player collections that I took in my career at Heritage, and I will say none of them had reserves on any of them. So, and they all exceeded our expectations and the client's expectations. So, and those are, that's experience on our part that we can refer to these other collections that sold without reserves, and that usually makes them a lot more comfortable. But yeah, there's all sorts of obstacles that you can face, and thankfully, I've been here for 14 years now. I don't know everything, so if there's questions that I need from some of my colleagues, they can help me answer. But our experience definitely helps in those situations.
Definitely. Another great advantage Heritage has is, yeah, we've got an expert for everything, a nerd for everything here. We have 20 experts on staff who've seen everything. We've yet to run into anything in my experience that someone on our staff isn't familiar with or doesn't know. And, another aspect of picking up collections is sometimes it's not the collector. Maybe if the collector passed, people inherited it, and then you can kind of, sometimes there's the two different sides of it, the people who are just ready to let it go, they were never interested in their grandfather, father, mother's collection, or the people that have a lot of sentimental value to it, even though they are the ones that didn't collect it. Have you ever run into any situations like that?
Um, yeah, I mean, most of the time, the big collections that I've picked up were from the players themselves. There was a big football jersey collection, the Kindler collection, and the son inherited it from his father. And when we took that in, he was definitely ready to sell. He did hold on to the jerseys forever after his father passed away. Usually when they call us in that sort of situation, they're ready at that point. Um, it's very rare that we'll go to a collection where someone inherited the collection that they won't be ready at that time. Yeah, there's the Kindler collection right there. There was that was a young version of me that was like 10 years ago. Um, but I remember that collection had some crazy stuff in it. You
Yeah,
see me,
let's talk about that collection. I remember that one as well. Just a gigantic player collection or jersey collection. Uh,
yeah.
how did you come into contact with them?
Yeah, we were at our old building at the time, on 3500 Maple Ave in Dallas. We're in a different facility now, and I got an inquiry through email, and I usually get the football inquiries. They're forwarded to me, and he had like three jerseys he was asking about. He just wanted to know the values of them, and I saw his address, so I believe it was a Dallas address. That's where our headquarters was located at the time, and I said, I think one of them was a Terry Bradshaw jersey, and one was like a Staubach or something, and they looked real from the photos to me, and I was getting real excited, and I'm like, can you stop by our office? I'd love to see them in person. So he said, sure, I can come later today. And I'm getting even more excited. I'm like, wow, rarely does it happen this fast. So we met in our gallery, or our what was it called, a showroom,
Yes.
and and we met. He brought the three jerseys out, and I'm getting real excited because they look real to me. We still have to run them past our authenticators, but they're looking pretty legit to me. And he said, "Well, I'm glad that you're excited, and I can see it on your face how excited and passionate you are about these jerseys, because I have about 300 more that are in California in my mother's garage, and they're all Hall of Famers, basically." And I started shaking. I remember I think that that was when we were on floor 14 and our showroom was on floor 17. And I literally sprinted to the elevator while the client was still in the showroom. I said, I gotta go get paperwork or something for this. And I ran and I told Chris Ivy, and he's like, okay, take a deep breath, calm down a second. And I said, like, Terry Bradshaw, Roger Staubach. He's like, calm down. I said, Chris, you don't understand. He has 300 jerseys of this caliber. And then he started hyperventilating, I think. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, we ended up. I got with the client after that. After I calmed down, um, and we set up a meeting at our Beverly Hills office. I met him on, I believe it was a Sunday morning in Beverly Hills. We lined up security to meet me at the office in Beverly Hills, and we Mr. Kindler pulled up his minivan or his truck or whatever it was. He had all these Rubbermaid containers just chock full of football jerseys, and we hauled them into our office and we inventoried them all. And it took at least a half a day to inventory them all, and it was unbelievable. To this day, that was 10 years ago or so, and I still have never seen a collection like that.
Yeah, here's some of the highlights here.
Yeah, he had some helmets too. That's right. Yeah, he had quite a
Elway
dozens of helmets.
Stanford jersey. I remember
Yeah,
that.
I do
Walter
remember
Payton,
that.
Joe Montana, Merlin Olsen. Yeah, so that's when it's fun, when a collection is just massive like that. It comes out of the woodwork. Uh, one thing I'm always amazed about in this job is how much raw, untapped material that is essentially fresh to the hobby outside the industry that's just been quietly collected. And especially back then, social media wasn't a big thing. So many people are posting their collections now, and a lot of collections have become more public. Um, but you've seen a lot of collections that were just totally off everyone's radar come in, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's usually the big collections are the ones that are off the radar, and that's what makes it really exciting. A lot of these player collections, people don't know what the players hung on to over the years, and you might want to bring up the photos of, say, the the Pat McBride collection was a real interesting one. He wasn't a player. He was the Milwaukee Bucks equipment manager, and he was a ball boy at County Stadium in the late '60s and through the '70s, and he was uh he was living in Madison, Wisconsin, and I think it was another inquiry via email, and somehow I think because he was from Wisconsin and I'm from Wisconsin, they forwarded it to me, and he had a Lou Alcindor game worn jersey and other things, and he invited me to Madison. I flew into Madison, went to his home, his family's home. He opened up the door. Him and his wife met me, and I walked into like the kitchen area, and he had a pretty big kitchen table. And on the kitchen table, he had the entire collection spread out on the kitchen table. And I'm a big Milwaukee Bucks fan, big Wisconsin fan, and he had the Lou Alcindor rookie jersey, the Oscar Robertson championship season jersey. He had baseball bats from County Stadium. He had just everything was lined up, laid out on the kitchen table and in their kitchen. And it was like a little museum in the kitchen. And it was absolutely extraordinary to see. I mean, this is literally one of the best basketball jerseys in the hobby. And that was another one that was sold quite a long time ago. We sold it at the Fletcher Sinclair Mansion in New York when we were doing the live sales for our Platinum Night auction. And him and his family actually flew out to the auction. That's always cool too, because they're excited to see this stuff, how we present it, and I think he was floored with the marketing that we did on it. And at the time, it definitely exceeded expectations. And yeah, it was that was a cool one. That was one that was off everybody's radar because no one, people know who the players are, but they rarely know who the equipment guys are. And just because you're an equipment guy, you might not have hung on to the best jerseys from the entire franchise's history. Uh,
He knew how to
So
pick them, that's for sure.
yeah, they let him pick what he wanted, and he picked the best ones that he could have picked for sure.
Yeah, and so you've seen quite a few player collections as well, and some real luminaries, especially being a Packers fan. What are some of your favorite Packers player collections you've handled?
I think the first one I sold was the Nitschke collection. It was from his son John Nitschke, John or Rich. I forget, it was so long ago now. But it wasn't like a ton of items, but he did have a couple jerseys, late career jerseys in there. I believe his Packer Hall of Fame ring was in there. That was maybe my first year at Heritage, so I was definitely still learning the ropes. My two favorite Packer jersey or Packer player collections, we just sold one of them, the Dave Robinson collection, and he is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And then we also sold the Jerry Kramer collection, and he's also in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Um, and both were very unique experiences. The Jerry Kramer collection, I ended up flying to Boise, Idaho, where he lives, and he had everything you could imagine. He kept everything. We ended up going through his garage. He had all the Rubbermaid containers full of different papers, and he had all of his game or his player contracts. He had his 65 championship ring, his 62 championship watch, his Super Bowl one and two ring. He sold the one, kept the two. Um, he had, I think, four or five game-worn Packer jerseys, including one that was worn in Super Bowl one. He had a kicking shoe that he wore in the 62 championship game. He kept everything. And I believe we estimated his collection at the time at around two or 250,000. And I think it ended up realizing close to double that. So that was really cool. I know Jerry was happy. He flew out to the auction at the time. We were doing that live auction in New York City. And that was neat because, when you're taking in their collections, you're not just taking in the collection and that's the end of it. Jerry and I went out to multiple dinners together. We were out in New York City together, drinking wine together. Um, that was the one where we had Minnesota Fats, the famous billiards player. We had his pool cue, and his widow was also she also consigned that pool cue to the same auction, and she flew out for that auction. So I'll never forget it. We're at this restaurant, this old school restaurant that Jerry used to go to when he was a player in the '60s in New York City, and on one of my sides was Jerry Kramer, and on the other side was Minnesota Fats' widow for dinner. So that was, I'm like looking, I'm like, this is so surreal right now. This is crazy. Um, and yeah, I mean, that was another experience. And there again, all the items did very well. Player collections and collections from former staff members of a team always seem to do really well because it's always hobby fresh material, and hobby fresh material seems to really do well and exceed expectations. So that's always exciting.
I remember Jerry was a lot of fun. He gave me a lot of hell for being a Cowboys fan the entire time we
Yeah,
were.
as he should.
So, from your perspective, what's it like when you're getting to spend all this time with, someone you've looked up to that's been one of your favorite players for your favorite team? He's a legend of it. What's it like when, you're flying out there and right before you actually meet him face to face? What's going through your mind?
I mean, it can be a little nerve-wracking, especially during my younger days at Heritage. Like the Jerry Kramer collection. That was one of my first big collections I took in and flew out to go see. So there was some pressure that I felt. Um, Once you get there and see how cool the people are, it relaxes you quite a bit, and they welcomed me in their house like it was like I'm one of the family. I actually spent the night there, um, which was really crazy. Um, and yeah, but there's definitely pressure. And we're looking through some of the items, and his daughter Alicia was there, and I remember he had a copy of the Sports Illustrated where him and Forrest Gregg are carrying Vince Lombardi off the field after Super Bowl II. And I am thinking this is like one of the most iconic Sports Illustrated covers of all time. I'm in the home of the person that's on the cover. So I asked Alicia, the daughter, what is it like
If she and
to
Jerry would put you on their shoulders and reenact the photos.
yeah, I mean, I was just in awe, and I asked Alicia, what's it like to have your dad on that cover? And I don't remember the response she gave me, but I had to ask her that question because it's surreal.
Amazing. And so this past August, we did Dave Robinson's collection, the Hall of Fame Packers linebacker. What was great about meeting Dave, who also came to Dallas?
Nicest guy you'll ever meet.
Indeed.
Not to take away anything from any of the other consigners because they've all been nice. But Dave was the man. I really enjoyed spending time with him, and man, he can tell stories. Um, what was it like? We went to the Cotton Bowl to do some photo shoots and video shoots with him, and that's where he made the big play in the '66 championship game against your Cowboys. And to go back to the Cotton Bowl where the biggest moment of his career happened was really special. And it just, it's a coincidence because we don't always go to the location of something like that, but it just happened to be in our backyard, Heritage's backyard, where it happened. And our PR director, Robert Wolanski, had connections to set up the shoot at the Cotton Bowl. So it just kind of worked out. And, our photo department's flying a drone around the Cotton Bowl, taking video and photos with that. And I remember it was really hot though. It was probably 100 degrees. And it's just another obstacle. You never know what you're going to face. You have to sit outside for an hour in this beating heat, and you have a Pro Football Hall of Famer in his gold jacket, so he's probably roasting. But you make it work the best you can. I think after we roasted, we went in the locker room and it was a lot cooler in there. But yeah, what was it like? It was another surreal experience and something that you're definitely grateful for the job at the largest collectible auction house.
Yeah, I would agree with Dave Robinson being able to hold court when we were at the Cotton Bowl, which I grew up in Dallas. I've lived in Dallas for a long time. That's an iconic spot. Getting to go into there, onto the field, in the locker room, and he showed us the spot where he made the tackle. He said, "Right here, you can still see the spot of blood." And then in the locker room, he just held court with some of the local media that was there and just was telling stories. And then he came to the National last year and did the exact same thing again. There was just this huge crowd of people, and he could have gone on for hours about it. He loved it.
Yeah, he loves telling the stories, and that's a lot of the older players that I've dealt with, the Lombardi Packers or some of these other players, they're a different breed. They definitely love to share the experience because they know that they're a piece of walking history, and they don't take that for granted. And they see the looks on people's faces when they're telling the story, and I think they know how much it means to these people to hear those stories.
I could see how much it meant to you, Chris, while we were there for sure. You
I
were
love I love hanging out with
loving
these guys. It's so
loving every
cool.
minute of it, no doubt.
Yes, I was giddy.
So let's talk about the Paul Krause collection as well.
That was
Uh,
the first Pro Football Hall of Famer that I ever spoke to with on the phone. So that was when I was a real rookie at Heritage. And man, he kept everything as well. The only thing we didn't get out of that house was his Hall of Fame bust. I think he told me everything else, I'm not that attached to anymore. He's a real interesting guy. He wasn't attached to any of the stuff. But he still kept it long enough, but he was ready to unload it. And that was cool. He kept every one of his Pro Bowl jerseys. There had to have been 6 or 7 of them. Pro Bowl helmets, his player contracts. He had a lot of the presentational painted footballs, and when I'm talking a lot, I'm talking like 40 of them. He holds the league record for interceptions, so he got a lot of interception balls. and he had them all in ball cubes in one of his the display rooms, and that was a big collection to pack up. And I did it myself, and like I said, it was the probably my first big collection that I picked up, so that was overwhelming, but it definitely worked out well. And
He's
and
got his Hawkeyes jersey here too. You know they kept everything if they have their college stuff after
college, I
such a
think he had his
long
high school
pro
jersey. I
career.
mean, it's weird because sometimes these older players, they kept everything, and sometimes they kept nothing. Uh, and I guess, it's just like some people are collectors in the hobby, and some people just aren't. There's no difference if you're in the league. So yeah, all the different Pro Bowl items, he made a bunch of them. So that was a cool one, and that was the first Pro Football Hall of Famer I had lunch with. And I just remember sitting at that table at some little diner, and I even told him, this is crazy. You're in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and we're sharing a patty melt together. This is nuts.
You didn't take him out for steak and lobster?
I think he paid for it, which is really rare. He just like, no, I got this on. Oh, a funny story with Jerry Kramer. I was out with his whole family. It wasn't funny at the time. Uh, I ended up taking his family out in Boise for lunch, and that's just how it works. And I forgot my credit card, so I looked at Jerry as kind of a fatherly figure to me, and I told Jerry, I'm like, oh, I feel so stupid, and he's like, don't worry about it. And his one of his sons, Matt was with, and he could tell how bad I felt, and he like put his arm around me. He's like, dude, do not worry about it. But you
How many
never know.
how
I
many
mean, that
times have
sort of
you
things happen.
how many times have you pulled that same trick on a Hall of Famer to get them to pay for
I do it all the time with like my colleagues at Heritage, but I
yeah.
don't try to make a habit out of it with our clients or any of these Pro Football Hall of Famers.
So you'd say being a lifelong sports fan, working at Heritage Sports has been a rewarding experience then.
It definitely has been. I hope that this is just the beginning. I've been here for 14 years, but there's a lot more collections to pick up. Like I said, we just picked a Babe Ruth gamer yesterday. So it's one of those things that before our Platinum Night deadline hits, I hope to maybe pick up another one or two. I was going to bring that up. Our Platinum Night auction is really shaping up to be one of the best sports auctions I've ever seen. We have so many cool items. We're going to be displaying it at the National Sports Collectors Convention in Chicago this year. Our deadline. When is our deadline for this one?
You're looking up deadlines over here?
Looking up deadline. Our deadline for the Platinum Night, for the consignment deadline is July 5th. I really urge people to get the items in way before July 5th. There might be some authentication or grading that needs to take place, so we want the items in as soon as possible. But for the key, the first night or the first day of the auction is where the items get the two full pages in the catalog, and there's usually 100 or 150 of those, and there's some slots left, but I would definitely urge anyone that has an item or a potential item for that section to get that in as soon as possible to make sure that you take advantage of those two full pages in the catalog.
Yeah, and we're going to have an amazing display at the National. It's in Chicago this year, which is a home base for Heritage. We have an office in Chicago, which you used to work at. So we have a lot of fun and interesting things planned. Looking forward to it. And if people want to get in touch with you, Chris, what's the best way?
Well, I'm going to be at the appraisal fair in Chicago next Friday and Saturday, so they could bring it in there if they're living in the Chicago area. But if not, you can definitely email me at chrisn@ha.com. chrisn@ha.com.
Well, always a pleasure, Chris. Thank you for sharing some of your great experiences. And we're going to do this every Thursday. We'll have another great topic next week at 2 p.m. Central on Thursday. We're going to have an auction closing that day, so there'll be a lot to talk about. And until then, Everybody have a good evening. Enjoy the NHL and NBA playoffs tonight.